It seems that we've got some exciting new Necron rules today. Let's take a look at this Cryptek army led by a cohort of Crypteks. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Necrons once more, and we've got another exciting Army of Renown from White Dwarf to review, and I feel like again it's a fairly well executed one. You do have to trade up things to gain access to it, but the Crypteks and Canoptek units that you do get some pretty powerful and meaningful boosts. This one is one that we'd already heard about from White Dwarf already. It's called the Cult of the Cryptek, and kind of feels like a follow-on to the Annihilation Legion Destroyer one that we had last month, which was also kind of fun, I thought. The rules for this one are found in White Dwarf 482, and it's basically an Army of Renown, a different way to play Necrons. One of Games Workshop's formations where you basically have to take certain units within the roster, but then those units get a whole bunch of different benefits, in particular a bunch of support options, in this case stratagems and warlord traits and things. This one's themed around a Cryptek expedition, a few basic Necrons, plus the Crypteks basically leading a whole load of pre-programmed Canoptek horrors to further their mysterious agendas. It's fully usable for match play, they do specifically say that in the White Dwarf, and as with the last one, I feel like delivering them in White Dwarf is probably a better system than those really expensive campaign books. It looks like these are the ones that would have come in some sort of Warzone Nephilim book, but Games Workshop seems to have cottoned on to the fact that most people aren't going to buy a £30 campaign book for 5 or 6 pages worth of supplemental rules. At least this way we still get some interesting supplemental armies, and picking up a White Dwarf mag is far cheaper. Let's take a look at the restrictions and benefits of the army then, and then we'll go through each of the different rule sections and sum up by talking about some of the strongest options in the army. Last week we had the one where you basically had to take all destroyers. This one is basically all Crypteks, Canoptek units, Necron warriors, and the convergence of Dominion. It means that basically a lot of the Necron Codex is locked out, including all of your powerful damage-dealing destroyers. You can't even take immortals in troops, and basically all of the Necron vehicles are locked out as well. They're very much focusing on Canoptek units as opposed to a Necron vehicle list. That leaves the units as available as these ones. I might have missed one or two, let me know if I've missed anything down in the comments. But for Crypteks, it'd be the Chronomancer, Plasmancer, Technomancer and Psychomancer, plus their unique ones Illuminor, Zeraz and Oricon. Certainly the Chronomancer and Technomancer are really good value right now, and Zeraz isn't bad either. Out of the Canoptek units, that'd be Wraiths, Spiders, Scarabs, the Canoptek Reanimator and Doomstalker, Cryptothralls, and the Seraptek Heavy Construct and the other Canoptek Forge World units that are a bit more rarely seen. I feel like Wraiths are probably going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting in this army. The Spiders aren't terrible to be honest, nor are Scarabs. Then there's Necron Warriors, tried and tested with their Gauss Reapers. That'll let you fill out some patrols or battalions and things. They combo pretty nicely with Chronomancers and the Veil of Darkness jumping them across the board, though they will have some limitations here. They won't be getting Ghost Arcs for example, and I don't believe that any of the Crypteks can take Resurrection Orbs either, so you're not going to be doing that. Then there's the Convergence of Dominion, which looks very pretty, but the less said about it competitively the better. It's not really going to add any strength to the army. Otherwise, for restrictions, all forces must be from the same dynasty. Not the worst thing, as in match play that's kind of the norm at the moment. And as with quite a lot of these armies of renown, they lose their dynastic code for a specific one here. You're swapping it out for a different benefit, which has some positives and negatives, but they do get to keep their dynastic keyword, so you could still say designate the army as Novok for example, and get the Protocol of the Hungry Void in both parts all game long. Roster-wise, it is a bit on the restrictive side. You do lose a lot of really good stuff, including the Silent King, Catan, all the Destroyers, Troops Immortals, Flayed Ones, and more. So basically the benefits do have to be pretty good to make these units pick up the slack. It also means that you wouldn't be able to use that dynastic code for OBSEC across the entire army, which is really quite a potent one for Necrons in general. While it does have some downsides, you do get some benefits. You trade the dynastic code for a Tomb Guardian special rule. This gives you plus attack across the entire army all game long, and you get to reroll reanimation protocols of a 1, so a little bit better at reanimating the Canoptek units. The attacks thing is a pretty nice combat boost to be honest. I'd say perhaps the single most obvious recipients of that are Wraiths. If you've got 5 of them, an extra 5 attacks per unit really isn't bad at all. The Scarabs and Spiders all both like it, maybe to a slightly lesser extent perhaps. Even Warriors might pack a bit more of a punch in combat with that going. But most of the Crypteks don't really care too much, they're not particularly strong in combat. I'd say the reanimation protocols bit is a bit so-so really. You generally have to be quite lucky in the first place to reanimate a 3-wound model like say a Canoptek Wraith. Reroll of 1s will help that a little bit, but not make it massively more likely. And the Necron Warriors don't care at all, as they already have it. I'd say definitely the extra attacks are the main draw of that code. Otherwise, they have a section saying that Crypteks basically work for command protocols. They get to stand in for nobles, though technically that's now defunct, seeing as the balanced data slate changed the way that command protocols work. I guess these rules were written for the old version of command protocols, the one that's actually in the Codex. And then, really, I think the biggest draws of the formation are the extra bits that you can access. You get Cryptek-specific Warlord traits, and 6 of them, 8 different Stratagems, giving you some really quite powerful boosts to various Canoptek stuff, mainly. And then 6 new bits of Cryptek Arcana. Largely, I'd say that these tend to be stronger than the ones that we've already got. First up, let's take a look through those Warlord traits then. I'd say that the Necron ones in general aren't enormously exciting. These ones definitely add a fair bit of strength, particularly as they have some decent buffs for big units. Master of the Cult is a nice simple select one unit within 9 inches for a +1 to hit. It's basically my will be done, but for Crypteks more or less. I feel like for 1 CP to access that all game long, that's pretty easy to pick up. Very nice on any of the Canoptek units that hit on 4s. Curator of Deadly Curiosities is an interesting weapon buff. One weapon gets AP -1 better, +1 strength and +1 damage. Unfortunately, this one doesn't apply to relics. I guess it doesn't seem like a bad damage increase for something like a Staff of Light, Chronomancer Stave, or maybe the Plasmancer's attack. I guess it's an option if you already have the Voltaic Staff elsewhere, maybe. Conductor of the Legions allows 1 unit within 9 inches to do actions while still shooting. Maybe not too bad for supporting warriors if you have them Veil of Darknessing across the board. Kinda depends on your game plan for that one. I maybe don't find it quite as exciting as the damage buffs out of this though. Codifier of Lesser Beings I feel like might be one of the best. You get to select 1 friendly unit within 6 inches and then 1 enemy unit that you can see, and that friendly unit gets +1 to wound against the enemy units. +1 to hit is all well and good, but +1 to wound is pretty excellent. This seems like it to be particularly nasty on things like Tomb Spider Particle Casters or Necron Warriors with Gas Reapers. Both of those are strength 5, so you could be wounding things all the way up to toughness 9 on a 4+. Particle Beamers can get extra nasty with a stratagem as well, so it seems like that could be a very easy one to use with them. Fluid Necrodermis gives you a failed save becomes damage 0 each turn, so a defensive buff plus ignoring movement modifiers. As a defensive boost it's okay to be honest, but Crypteks just aren't really very tanky in the first place. I feel like if one gets exposed then this probably isn't going to be enough to save it, so probably just keep them hidden. Finally we have Infomonger. 1 unit within 6 inches gets both benefits of the active command protocol. I guess that would probably affect both the permanently active one and the other one. Though I feel like the permanently active one, you might well just pick the same dynasty to get that on both protocols each time. I kind of feel that this one has a bit more limited use really. Out of these, the +1 to wound one is excellent, the +1 to hit one is great, and Conductor of Legions and Deadly Curiosities both seem usable. Nice easy command phase damage boost though, really seem hard to go wrong with. Next up, we've got a new stack of Cryptek Arcana. Broadly speaking, I'd say that these ones seem a lot more usable for the points than several of the ones from the main codex. First up is one that I really quite like. The Atomizer Stave for 15 points makes a Plasmancer's Harbinger of Destruction ability become 6d6 rather than 3d6. This means that your Plasmancer shielded behind the lines will be chucking out an average of 3 mortal wounds per turn, plus his little shooting attack, plus maybe some more mortal wounds if you get up close. I'd say this actually tips the balance between the Plasmancer being kind of rubbish and kind of good. I think in this army I would take exactly 1 Plasmancer along and give him this stave. If you can keep him screened and firing for the entire game, that could be 15 mortal wounds right there. Next up we've got the Auracular Mantle for 20 points. This one makes a Technomancer's Canoptek Cloak grant an aura of ignores cover. Really nice for shooting Canoptek units or Reaper warriors. You could combine that with a +1 to wound to have a unit of Tomb Spiders chucking out 36 shots at strength 5 with +1 to wound, all ignoring cover. Next we've got the Auto Divinator for 20 points. In each of your command phases you roll a dice and on a 5+ you gain an extra command point. On average that's going to be 1 or 2 command points over the course of the game, which I think is maybe a bit equivocal for 20 points plus a little bit random. Depending on how CP strapped you are, maybe it could be just about worth it, but maybe a bit borderline and you've got 20 points left that you don't want to spend on anything else. Next we've got the Entropic Chronoshackle. This is 30 points for a Chronomancer, and this one messes with enemy fallbacks. You get to select 1 enemy unit at the start of their movement phase. On a 4+, that unit can't fall back this turn. That really could be pretty brutal when combined with Canoptek Wraiths. Perhaps aim to charge 1 unit and kill it, then consolidate it into another that really doesn't want to be in combat, then try and Chronoshackle them to stop them falling back. It could be really quite nasty if it goes off, but it does have a 50-50 chance of failing, which does seem quite nasty for such an expensive Arcana bit. The Neutron Shroud is 15 points. This gives you a 2+ armor save, plus a once per game thing where you can have a 3+ invul save for a phase. Again, really not a bad durability insurance on a key Cryptek. If you've got a bunch of stuff stacked on one and you don't have any Arcana for them, I guess that could be okay to try and protect your investment. Finally, we've got Obedience Nanoscarabs for 25 points. This one's a Psychomancer upgrade that allows you to use 2 different Harbinger of Despair abilities on the same unit. Say, for example, mess with their movement and also deny them objective secured, perhaps. It definitely would make that debuff ability far more nasty. If you're running a Psychomancer anyway, then I think that this could potentially be worth it. I'm just maybe still a little bit unsold as to how much worth Psychomancers are, just because they still need to get really quite close to act on the enemy unit and might just get killed. Plus, even if you do get them in range, there's a pretty reasonable chance that high leadership enemies might just ignore the effect anyway. Maybe just a little bit too random for me. In general though, these give you a fair few more fun options. I'd say the pick of the bunch are the Atomizer Stave to make a very shooty Plasmancer, and the Aura Ocular Mantle for the Ignores Cover Aura. Both of those seem pretty excellent for 15 and 20 points. Last and perhaps most important are the new stratagems that you can get. Most of these seem to be pretty direct damage or utility boosts to the various different Canoptek units. First up, we have 1 CP Overkill Protocols for Wraiths. You activate this in your command phase. Until your next command phase, you get an extra pip of AP with Vicious Claws, or an extra hit roll per attack that you make with Whip Coils. Not too bad if you have a unit that you know is going to be doing some work in combat this turn. It's kind of nice that it affects 2 turns rather than 1. If they happen to be fighting in your opponent's turn, then you get the extra AP there as well. Seems like an okay damage boost if they are just about to hit home. For 1 CP, we've got Stalky Annihilator. This one makes a Doomstalker able to move and fire on its top profile, and can also do so even if it fell back as well, so it gives it a bit of insurance against getting tagged and having its blast weapon damage ruined. I feel like this one existing here makes the Doomstalker into a far more reliable pick for the army. I guess if you want ranged anti-tank in this force, it's the way that you've got to go. I certainly feel like it could make one of them a bit more usable. For 1 CP, we've got Aggression Overrides. This one is a Spider boost, and again you use it on your command phase and it lasts till your next one. Canoptek spiders in the unit get a +2 to their move, and also hit on a 2+ in melee. That's really quite a good boost to be honest. Spiders don't do too badly in melee in the first place. They get 5 attacks at strength 8, AP -3 and damage 2, and to have those hitting on 2s rather than 4s is quite a big deal, particularly when you could apply this to 3 of them in a squad. In theory that'd be around about 12 or 13 attacks hitting home at that profile. Combined with the extra move, it seems like just the sort of stratagem you want to use when they're getting in charge range to hit the enemy. Quite nice to activate it when you need it. For 1 CP, we've got the Swarm Descends. This one can give Canoptek Scarabs Deep Strike. I guess not too bad if you want a bit of a harassment unit, as the rest of the Codex won't be able to Deep Strike here. You don't get access to flayed ones or anything like that, but still 1 CP to Deep Strike Scarabs isn't that great I don't think. Plus they have pretty decent movement anyway, so are usually fairly happy starting on the board. For 1 CP, there's Exalted Cryptek. This allows you to take a second Cryptek Arcana on 1 Cryptek, and you can use the stratagem twice in Strike Force if you should so desire. You still have to pay for the Arcana upgrades, so the second one is going to come more expensive with a CP on it as well. But it does open up for some pretty interesting combos. For example, you could have that Technomancer with a cloak, both granting Ignores cover and also giving his minions light cover as well with the Hypermaterial Ablator. Seems quite nice just to have a super layered buffing Cryptek, or you could use it to stack a Vital Cryptek with one of those durability Arcana bits to make sure that they survive to do their job. Next we've got Canoptek Overdrive. This is 1 CP and it's used when a Wraith model is destroyed. For the rest of that turn, when that Wraith unit is killed in combat, if they haven't fought already they can fight in death. Quite a nice one if you're fighting against something melee. It means that if your opponent attacks you with a dangerous but fragile combat unit, it means that you could potentially drag down a whole bunch of them with you. I think that that's quite a solid one to have access to. Then, perhaps one of my favourite stratagems out of the bunch is Hyperdense Particle Beams. This turns the Canoptek Spider's particle beamers from being something that spams out a bunch of volume fire into something genuinely dangerous. It means that particle beamers for the unit get an extra AP -2 better, and when you can be spamming out 36 shots with them, that's going to give just about anything that they take aim at a hard time. In theory, if you did have a couple of big units of Canoptek Spiders with the beamers, you could maybe have a couple of Crypteks lurking behind the line, one with that +1 to wound trait, plus maybe a Canoptek control node, and then maybe that Technomancer one for Ignores cover. That'd be 36 shots hitting on 3s at strength 5 AP2 and +1 to wound and ignoring cover against their luckless targets. Seems pretty efficient to me, and with their claws it's not like they're particularly bad in melee either, particularly if you can shell out for that Aggression Override strat. Finally, one more buff for spiders in the Enhanced Gloom Prism. For 1 CP you can make a Deny the Witch test +2 to deny before you roll it. I think that one's a little bit borderline, but if you want to throw absolutely everything against stopping one key enemy spell, it could be okay, particularly if it's something pivotal that's going to do a crazy amount of mortal wounds, or maybe even something like a psychic action that's trying to get victory points. After these I feel like there's a bunch of good stuff. Definitely some awesome support for spiders in the overrides and the particle beams. Exalted Cryptek looks usable, and extra AP and Fighting in Death for Wraiths both look very nice indeed. Overall, putting it all together, obviously there's going to be quite a limited roster of things that you can choose, but some picks just look very obvious. I feel like most of the lists are going to take at least a few big blocks of warriors, maybe teleporting them with a Veil of Darkness and a Chronomancer, as is fairly popular at the moment, and laying into something with the Gauss Reapers, maybe at +1 to hit or +1 to wound from those Warlord traits. I think for an optimal list you'd want to take multiple big units of Wraiths to do frontline work and skirmish with the enemy. They're already pretty fine as a unit, but getting +1 attack and those nice stratagems to support them are both great. Then I'd be tempted by a couple of big blocks of spiders with the particle beamers. That stratagem plus the Cryptek support makes them go from okay to something genuinely pretty dangerous, plus they can follow up with a pretty meaty charge with +1 attack and the weapon skill 2+ thing. I'd want one Plasmancer with that 66 shots Arcana bit, almost certainly a Technomancer with the Ignores cover cloak going around somewhere, and I feel like Novok is probably going to be the dynasty of choice for these guys, getting you both parts of the Hungry Void all game long. Plus you have their stratagem for extra attacks as well, which will make wraiths or spiders hit even more viciously. Overall I feel like on paper at least it seems pretty interesting. I'm not 100% convinced it's going to be the best way to play Necron still. You do pass up on an awful lot of good stuff, including things like the Silent King for the godly rerolls, plus the whole army Auspex, but I feel there's definitely some interesting combos here. Wraiths and spiders are both looking particularly savage, and I've got some really nice support options. Let me know what you think though. Would you be tempted to put a Cryptek cult on the table, either competitively or casually? So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed a bit of a rundown of the new Necron Army of Renown. I did make a review of the Destroyer-based Annihilation Legion a few weeks back, so I'll link that one down in the video description below if you'd like to see that next. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, we'll definitely have more stuff for the Necrons in the future. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to quickly mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can afford to keep on making videos quite this much, with new 40k stuff every single day. If you have been enjoying quite a bit, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.